Three, two, one, go. What is up, guys? Welcome back to Random Select Daily number 8. Today's date is Friday, April 12th, 2013, and I'm back with Corey. Say hello, Corey.
Hey, what's up?
And today we're going to talk a little bit more about Bioshock Infinite, actually, and
Again.
and a debate recently came up about the violence in Infinite, and I think we're going to try to cover both sides a little bit. Corey definitely has one side. I'm just going to defend the other side a little bit, as we just debated before we talked. But Corey, can you kind of explain what exactly is going on here, like what the debate is coming from?
Sure. I don't know exactly where it originated, but the first thing I saw about it was a Polygon article. It was from April 2nd. Um, and it's the guy who wrote it, Chris, was talking about how his wife really liked the first 15 minutes, but when things go bad and things get violent, then she couldn't do it anymore, and he felt like Um, that was like a missed opportunity for more people to play it, I guess, is part of it. Um, because the characters and the story and everything are so good that he feels bad more people couldn't play it. But then he also goes into just the harshness of the violence and the brutality and everything, whether or not it's helping move the video game category forward as an art form, or if it's detrimental
Yeah.
to its progression. That's, I think, those are the core um, things that people are complaining about Bioshock, because it started out so artistic and so good that when it goes violent, then that's where they draw the line. Like, no. So personally, and this got brought up again because there's a new, I think this Destructoid article was from today, I believe. Yeah, 2 hours ago. um,
Oh wow, really? Wait, no, you
yeah.
sent it
Oh,
to
no,
me
no.
last night.
Well, I did. It says
I
two
thought
hours.
so.
Oh, maybe updated it.
Yeah, it's probably updated.
Yeah, 3 hours ago. Weird.
I was
um,
like, I'm pretty sure you sent it to me yesterday, or oh, maybe it was today. Never mind.
yeah, no, it was today.
Never
Yeah,
mind.
I just sent it to. I sent you something else. Um, and he kind of had the counter, which I sort of more in line with, of the idea being that the violence defines that universe, and also, I mean, the first game also violent. So why would you expect the sequel to not be violent? Especially given the connection between, spoilers. There are connections between the first and second, or first and third game. Um,
Oh yeah, I probably should have put that. There's still be spoilers in this, probably.
yeah, it's gonna be hard not to with some things, but
Yeah.
um, but where was I going with that? I got derailed. Um, oh, that the violence is important for defining that character. Um, and the other part of it is, if you're coming into this expecting a choose your own adventure, then you're playing the wrong game. That's not the game they're making. It's not the game they want to make, and it's sort of ridiculous for you to expect every game to be a choose your own adventure where I want to be a pacifist. It's like, well, they don't have to design their game that way, you know?
No, but
And it wouldn't be fun to play either. If I'm not saying a
well,
game
that's
has to be violent
subjective.
to be fun, but it wouldn't. It would have been a completely different game if it stayed at that stage of walking around this city in the clouds and just walking around. Where does it go from there if you're not fighting people? You know what I mean? It would have been a completely different game, and I just don't know why they expect them to. No one goes to Tarantino and says, you know what? I think your film should be less violent. If your next one could be less violent, then you would really move film forward as an art form. You know what I mean? That just doesn't happen. So
Yeah,
I find it a little perplexing. It's like saying, oh, if Tarantino had less swearing and violence, then more kids could watch his films. Well,
yeah,
it's like
but
he's not making films for kids
but
or
films
squeamish people.
films
You know what I
have
mean?
evolved. Like they've had much more years to evolve than video games. Video games is still like what, like 30, 40 years old or whatever, like less than that.
Yeah,
if you go back to Pong, like video games haven't had it like haven't really been that great since until like maybe the I would say 64 PS1 era. Like before that years there's fun games, but they weren't really doing much with it. It was still just kind of a fun thing, right? And then finally
yeah,
they started doing more with the industry.
yes.
So I mean like so I can kind of see where people are going with what was the violence really needed? Like uh, I'll say it right now that I actually don't see how the game would have worked that well either without the violence. Uh, but I can kind of see like I think it's not even just Bioshock. I think the reason Bioshock is getting such a big like getting a bigger debate about it is that it was a game that like let's say let's without the like the other parts that weren't violent, it was such a beautiful game that a lot of people loved and wanted to talk about. But then you bring up the then you have the violence and stuff like that. And oh crap, what was I saying? I totally blinked out in my middle of my sentence. Oh, I mean, I guess it comes down like this the violence in the world right now, at least in the U.S. has with gun violence and stuff like that have been at an all-time high right now. And of course, then there's also the violence in video games of where, like a lot of video games was getting flack because of its violence. And I feel like a lot of people wanted to use Bioshock Infinite as this game that another game that you can go, this is what a game is capable of that that doesn't require violence or whatever. And I think people are maybe a little disappointed that uh, that it wasn't like that because I feel like also before the game actually came out, a lot of people were expecting the first 15 minutes or whatever, but weren't exactly expecting the complete violence. Even if Bioshock One was like that, like who knew Bioshock One and Infinite were going to be connected? Like they didn't necessarily need to be connected. Uh, and it wasn't really until right at the end, right? I mean,
Yeah.
uh, so I feel like I can kind of see why people are maybe a little more upset about it, just like the guy and his wife, right? Like, I like like I showed my dad Heavy Rain because it was such a unique video game experience, and my dad's not against video games or anything like that, but it was a game that I can show him and go like, wow, look how cool this can be. And I think people wanted to do that with Infinite, and I definitely know like my official stance was that I don't think some of the violence was needed, especially the melee kills. But uh, I like when I was first playing Bioshock, the Infinite was like, yo, yeah, it's kind of cool. I'm going through every single place. I took a bunch of random videos of like kids doing rock paper three, right? I showed that in the spoiler cast, and I did a bunch of that kind of stuff. And then the first time I get the skyhook melee, and then I pop a guy's head, and I go, "Yep, I'm still playing a video game." And Corey will say like, and I don't know what it was Ken Levine, right? I don't know if that was supposed to be of like, oh, the book your guy is a brutal guy, and he knows it, and he'll accept it. I didn't quite get that. My gut reaction was like, oh, I'm playing a video game again, and I feel like maybe that's what people are kind of debating about. I mean, I don't think there's a bit if people are debating that. Oh, I wish there was a way to sidestep all the violence and just kind of talk it out. Like, you know,
That is kind of what, like, your angle is different than I
yeah,
feel a lot of the people against the violence. You're saying it more took you out of the experience, the extreme violence, whereas they're more just, I wish there was a way to non-violently play this game so more people could experience it, basically.
yeah. I mean, I like. There's no video game that does that though. You know what I mean? Like, Mass Effect. Like, I recognize Mass Effect like has those different quote unquote branches, but in the
Mhm.
end, you're like no matter how gruesome or mean you are in that game, your cast members aren't going to leave you. You're still going to get to the end of the game.
Yeah.
And and then Fallout's probably another one that has like the persuasion techniques and stuff like that. It's not an MMO where you can just kind of talk your way to like getting better stuff. Like most video games are just you're gonna have to have some kind of violence in it because, or at least some kind of combat. Like maybe not violence or shooting or anything, but there's gonna be combat, and I don't think the game was gonna be able to ignore violence. I don't even know why people would think that at all, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it that part of it strange. But for me, It was when we talked about this a little earlier. The two parts that struck me as I me controlling the character, I was thinking I don't want him to do that. That's not what I wanted him to do. Was when he, stabbed the people in the face with the skyhook or whatever it's called at the beginning, and then spoilers. This is talking about the ending, so if you're still listening, then you want to play the game, don't listen to this. You smash.
Master Chief jumps in. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, yeah. Master Chief jumps in and like breaks the fourth wall and everything.
Becomes like Deadpool.
Oh my gosh, horrible. Yeah, Comstock is Deadpool.
We should make
um,
this game.
yeah.
Where's the
Oh,
mod? Some modders make this.
oh my gosh.
I don't even know how it would
Um,
work, but it'd be really stupid.
but the part where you smash Comstock's head into the fountain, I was just like, no, no, that's not. It just said intervene, and then he does that, and it's at least at the beginning of the game, it's setting up what type of person you are. You're a horrible person who massacred people. You were at Wounded Knee, where they murdered innocent women and children and men, like hundreds of them, and then just put them all in a big hole and buried it. And that's an actual, a real historical event that happened, which in this parallel universe, it had the same event, but slightly different, or, where he took part in it. And it's talked about how he was very brutal at that event. So for me, it was setting that up early before we really knew any of that stuff. Like you see on the box when you're in the boat, you see the Wounded Knee placard or something. So they kind of set it up, but I didn't even remember that till later.
I don't know.
I looked at that and I was like, oh, Wounded Knee. All right. Like I wasn't sure what that meant, but later on it was revealed. So for me, it helped set up. It made sense later why he was so brutal. He's just messed up in the head and just a very brutal, violent person in a violent universe. And because he, sorry, is another version of that same guy from Bioshock 1 who was also violent, it makes sense that they're both that way. So it makes even more sense that they're. It's like if Bioshock 1 is violent, then why would people expect Bioshock 2 or 3, whatever you want to call it,
Infinite.
to be, well, yeah. Um, to me, it's Bioshock 2. But why would they expect it to not be violent all of a sudden? It just seems silly. It'd be like, oh, in Halo 5, there better not be aliens in it, or otherwise I'm not playing that game. You know what I
Well,
mean? It just seems weird.
I mean,
Like if Ken Levine came out and made a new game in a new universe, and it was a puzzle game, had quirky characters and no violence, great. I would play the game. That sounds great. But I wouldn't come into Bioshock Infinite being like, oh, there better not be a lot of violence in this game
I
because
guess I
you know
was
what I
gonna.
mean?
My argument was not related to this.
Oh,
I'm still like on the point of like, you know, I've always been a person that like you're talking about how it's set up the character and stuff like that, and I can see now that you tell me that I go okay I guess I now realize that, but that's of course not a good thing, right? That so I was someone that was kind of trying to pay attention to every single detail, like everything. If there was some kind of distraction, I would pause the game, make sure, and then go and put my full 100% attention. I was trying to do everything. I realized how bad the flowers looked, or at least in the first
oh yeah,
part.
yeah. So like
like
terrible.
that's that's to the extent I was trying to pay attention, and I still like when I got the skyhook, it sets up this combat, and then next thing you know, you're blowing up some guy's head, and it's just kind of, to me, what I ended up seeing was just kind of like, oh, okay, okay, I'm playing. Okay, yeah, I forgot I'm playing a video game. I'm not playing Dear Esther or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I've always been a guy that uh, I've been I'm a person that says like you can display like I feel like this is actually a pretty good sentence of you can display violence or yeah violence without being graphic necessarily, and all the graphic things are mostly in the melee, and the biggest thing to me actually was just purely the head popping, because like all like I think when I first saw it, like I just wanted to like yell out like fatality or something with Mortal Kombat, and it's just like it kind of brought me out of the game a little bit, and and then you guys already know my stance on the combat in general, but so I mean I can kind of like I don't see why people felt like Bioshock could have worked without violence at all, like no fighting, like
Yeah.
like a peace treaty. I mean, maybe there's gonna be a Martin Luther King video game sooner or later, but where you debate everything and stuff like that and do speeches. But it wasn't this game, like you said, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, and like I was saying, like I'm not against non-violent games at all. Like Portal 2. I love that game. It's one of my favorites.
You
It's
killed a
no,
lot of robots in that.
well, indirectly. It's indirect violence.
Oh god. So that's
Um,
okay if it's
so that's okay.
if I
That's
set up
fine.
what are those called where you like everything attaches to each other in a weird way. What are those machines called? Where
What?
like you have dominoes falling and then dominoes falls into a bucket and the bucket rises.
Oh, like a
I forgot what they're
yeah,
called.
I know what you're talking about. It's like a
I know it has a specific name, but I can't think of it.
yeah. I know what you're talking about. Gold bloom? No,
Gold.
there was something. What is it? That's gonna bother me.
So glad I said it then. Yeah, I think.
Um,
Anyways, I think I think we both feel that like quote unquote the violence. The question I put on the video was violence was it needed? I'm gonna honestly in agreement. I can see where people are talking about like maybe it's too violent or whatever. I can see it too violent because
mhm,
I don't like, or I guess I should say this. It's not too violent, but it's not what people wanted in terms of violence. And I
mhm,
could definitely see that and see why maybe people are a little upset because they did like Bioshock Infinite is supposed to be a lot of people are talking about the game being this not once in a generation but like one of those games that are kind of generation defining, I guess you can say. And when you talk to other people with video games, it's so hard to not mention a game that's violent and then and then try to convince people, yeah, see, video games can be art, they can be beautiful, they can be great, and you show first 15 minutes of Bioshock and go, yeah, wow, I agree with you, this is so amazing, this is such a cool world, and then you pop someone's head and they go, okay, now I see it's a video game.
well, I guess I just don't really see that because again, like Reservoir Dogs, very violent graphic film, but same kind of thing. It was like defining for that time and sort of the same with like what's his name, the Good, Bad, and the Ugly director. He changed westerns for that time. There's directors that sort of make put film in a new direction, and I feel like this video game is that for video games. You know what I mean?
I think there's a lot of violence in video games already, though. Like, I'm not sure what you mean.
No, no, I mean everything else about it. I'm saying the violence doesn't add or subtract from that, in
But I
my
think it
opinion.
does subtract to a lot of people. I mean, maybe
Well, I
they're
mean,
uninformed,
but
but that doesn't mean like, that's kind of the whole. That's probably the biggest problem with video games is that to get a full effect of it, it's at least 8 to 12 hours. A film you watch 2 hours and kind of go, oh, I understand why it was so violent. But if you watch, the head popping and go, I have to watch, 8 more hours of this, and then you go 8 hours in, and then you see the Comstock dashing, and then, like, well, I like it's still too violent for me. Like it was beautiful, and then it became this. It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde or whatever, right?
again,
Like
like I guess I've seen a lot of really good films that are also really violent. I mean, Alien, um, just most really highly revered films are pretty violent. Um, I, it's just
yeah, but
part of
there's also a lot of
humanity.
other films that aren't violent that are great. I
Yes,
can't say
and
that
video
there are
games are
others.
starting to do that more as well. Like I said, like Portal 2. I mean, yeah, maybe technically there's violence, but
I
compared
was
to most
joking there.
games, it is not a very violent game. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like we have enough of those games happening. We need more of
Hmm,
it, but that doesn't mean that every game has to not be violent.
how many? other games other than Portal though. I'm trying to think of other games that aren't where violence isn't quite the combat.
There's plenty of games. I mean, maybe not as popular
I mean,
as Call of Duty and things, but I mean,
it's
like
hard.
Psychonauts is relatively non-violent. I mean, you punch things, but
But
there's no
it's still
blood or
violent.
anything. You know what I mean?
That like I said, there's a difference between violence and graphic.
Yeah,
That's still
I think there's
violent.
lots of non-graphic games, and from the
Non-graphic games,
same
yeah,
the
I'll
outcry,
agree.
a lot of indie developers are making stink about it, and I think a lot of them make good non-violent games, but they're not to the same scope and money making.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard in a video game. Like, if you don't have some kind of fighting, what kind of combat are you gonna have? Like, Phoenix Wright actually is probably one we should mention-ish, kind of. It's not even violent. It's not really graphic either, but there's dead people in it. I don't know how to describe that.
There's a little bit of blood at the beginning.
Yeah, there's blood, but it's more red stuff than
More
like.
red stuff.
Well, I mean, like you never like it's picture.
Hey, The
It's not a
Sims
moving
3.
picture.
It's
Yeah,
a very popular non-violent game.
but like what I'm just trying to say is that I think people wanted Bioshock Infinite a little bit to be kind of one of those games because it has such a great world
Yeah.
that it might have not needed violence. This specific story Ken Levine told in Bioshock Infinite needed violence. But I think when people were hearing about it, seeing like Elizabeth and like the world,
Hmm.
people were maybe expecting different things and like like you said, like if you go back to Bioshock One, it was gonna be violent, but I think a lot of people were maybe hoping that I can share this experience with someone who isn't quite into video games or doesn't understand it. I can sit down with them, experience the game with them, like at the same time, not like going, like I showed my dad Heavy Rain, but I already experienced it, so I didn't really get, we didn't get to, we weren't quite on the same line because I knew everything that was going on,
Hmm.
and I feel like maybe that's what people were wanting from Bioshock was a game that you can sit with someone, experience with them like that. Then they'll go, wow, video games are awesome, and there are other games out there, and they'll be more open to it. And I think people are like, well, okay, I guess that didn't work out.
Yeah. Again, I guess to me, it just seems like they had incorrect expectations. If they're expecting to be able to play Portal 2 with their wife on co-op, that's totally reasonable, and they'd probably have a great time. But expecting them to just sit and watch Bioshock Infinite, I guess is just strange to me unless your wife likes violent films. You know what I mean? It would be like what's the new Evil Dead remake just came out. It would be like taking your wife to go see The Evil Dead when she doesn't like horror films. It's like, well, what were you expecting? It's a horror film. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I guess. I mean, like I said, I don't think Bioshock One and Infinite even needed to be connected. Like you're right, since
Well,
like
they kind of did if they're the same name. If it was going to be
yeah,
something else,
they
they
can
should have
be
named it something different.
similar still though. I mean, you're right. Like there was, I guess like the biggest thing is there was combat in Bioshock. You kind of have to keep the gameplay in Infinite, but I don't know. I think people were hoping, maybe not even expectations necessarily, and hoping, and they're more hopeful than anything. Maybe blind hope, maybe incorrect, hopeless hope. I guess I don't know how.
Hopeless hope.
But yeah. Anyways, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, I think we covered all of it.
Still a good game. Go out and buy it if you
But
want,
no,
unless you don't like violence.
if you don't like
If you
violence, you
don't
don't
like
buy
Quentin
this game.
Tarantino or Master Chief, don't buy this game.
Yeah,
But
if
if you do,
you
if you don't mind,
otherwise go
or
buy
Deadpool,
Portal 2. It's still a good game, and just wait for a Steam sale.
yeah. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed, and we will see you later. Adios.